start. Now you know I'm coming through. When the growth look good on you, best believe they wanna screw now. I've been trying to climb, devil threw me in the dark. Baby, don't be insecure, you can still go make a mark like blow. Could never let them drain my soul now. Blow. Table turning like doorknobs, wow. Blow. I think I'm about to set sail. I'm a walking, living legend, walking with my chest out. Life keep dealing me cards, I keep feeling it.
What's going on, people? What's going on? It's G, and we are back in the building. Had a little bit of fluff on the beard. Yeah, beard is growing in absolutely perfectly. I hope you guys are well, and we are back with episode 2 of Top 5 Under 23 Ballers of the Week. There has been quite a few of those, if I'm being totally honest with you. It seems to be a decent week, you know, as certain leagues obviously start to kick in with their first game. Obviously, Bundesliga got their first game under their belt, and obviously Serie A got their league off and running as well. And then obviously the Premier League, you know, second game in. You know, it's been an eventful weekend of football. A lot's obviously been going on. We all got a laugh at Chelsea. Sorry, I had to put that in. I know this isn't a Premier League show or anything like that, but we had to put that in anyway, unfortunately for Chelsea. Their big summer signing, Moises Caicedo, didn't really have the best of weekends. Don't worry. I feel like at some point in the season, we will be putting him into this top 5 under 23 ballers. But obviously, we're here. Episode 2. Guys, make sure you smash a like. Make sure you share. Make sure you subscribe to the damn channel. And without further ado, let's just get straight into it. Now, obviously, as I mentioned before last week, I'm not putting these in any specific order, so to speak. Yeah, we're just going to kind of like, mull around, go through the leagues and stuff like that, and then, go from there. And I think, this week we'll start in the Premier League, talk about this player, fantastic youngster. When I pop him up on the screen, you guys already know, they call him the young Gazza. They call him the young Gazza, and that is Phil Foden. Now, Phil Foden played against Newcastle, 1-0 victory for Manchester City. They've got no Kevin De Bruyne. Obviously, you already know Riyad Mahrez has obviously left. Gundogan obviously left as well. So they kind of do need someone to take up that mantle, in terms of someone who can play in that kind of position, take control of these kind of games. And if I'm being 100% honest with you, I genuinely thought that Phil Foden, was absolutely magnificent, against Newcastle. Now, Newcastle played really, really well, if I'm being honest. I say that in context, they lost 1-0, of course, and Manchester City had the lion's share of possession, but they defended really, really well, in that game. And, they were able to keep Manchester City, to only scoring 1 goal, and chances few and far between. But Phil Foden, he didn't even get the goal. It was Julian Alvarez who did get the goal. But Foden's performance, against Newcastle, finding pockets of space, he was absolutely everywhere in that final third. And I think when we're looking at it, if you check his heat map here, you guys will obviously see, if I take the banner off for you so you can see a bit easier. You guys can obviously see here, look, everywhere, absolutely everywhere. He dropped in, to help out back in defense, picking up the ball off the defenders, making those tackles every now and again. Then in the attacking third as well. Absolutely brilliant. The pockets of space that this guy was finding was brilliant. And it's one of those things, and now everyone already knows, look, before we look at Phil Foden's stats and stuff like that from the game, look, ultimately, I always talk about Manchester City. I'm a lover of football, hence why I decided to do this show. But I'm a lover of football, and I love, beautiful things, watching certain teams play, especially Pep Guardiola, who's, my all-time favorite manager. And when I look at the way that he plays, when I look at the system that he kind of implements for his players, a lot of people always like, oh, but, he's able to buy this guy and that guy and this guy and that guy. And I'm always like, you've got to understand, he's not buying, I can't remember, maybe Haaland, if you want to put Haaland into that category. He doesn't really buy these world-class players. He buys very good players, of course he does, and he's got the facilities to do that. But ultimately, the way that he's able to implement his style, his tactics for some of these players is amazing. Even Rico Lewis, we saw him last season, Manchester City's title running. We saw how he was able to be implemented into the squad in a position where it's a bit tough. Do you know what I mean? It wasn't a position that was would I say, I wouldn't say it was alien to him, so to speak, but it was definitely a position that he had to kind of learn and understand on the job. Now, obviously, as we're going to see with these under 23 ballers, they're going to make mistakes. They're going to have crap games this season. They're going to probably even, some of these guys we may never even see these guys again. This might be the only time that they appear, on this show. But ultimately, regardless of anything, we are going to see those kind of star performances. And with the way that, football's going with the market and stuff like that, in terms of how expensive some of these young ballers are going to be or are at this current moment in time, yeah, I think it's gonna be crazy. It's gonna be crazy. So people are looking for the next player. They're looking for their next version of Mbappe, their next version of Foden, their next version of Jude Bellingham, Musiala, Pedri, Gavi. These top guys. Everyone's looking for them. Everyone's praying that they've got someone in their academy who is that kind of player. Either they can sell them or they can obviously burst through into that first team. And Phil Foden obviously coming through, the Manchester City youth ranks as well, learning off players like David Silva, De Bruyne, Gundogan, Aguero when he was there, being there, when Manchester City were, becoming this kind of team, local lad, I believe, so to speak. So, for him to be there and be in this kind of position, and now we're not just this season, by the way, I'm talking throughout his kind of short-ish career. He's got a couple of Premier League titles, to be honest, and a Champions League. So, it's been a brilliant start to his career. But we've seen the kind of development from him. He can play on the wing, he can play in that number 10 position, he can play as a false nine, he can play left or right, he can play central midfield. He can fill in so many different positions. I don't even really know what his best position is. I don't think he's usually, I usually say with certain players, oh, they need to find a position kind of thing. Obviously, Pep Guardiola is not going to be there forever, so he will at some point probably do need to find, a position for him. But at this current moment in time, I don't even think it matters with someone like Foden because he can appear and pop up anywhere, on the pitch in itself. Obviously, we look at the stats from the game itself. As I mentioned, excellent. If I'm being honest with you, played the full 90 minutes, 7 chances created, got himself an assist. Successful dribbles, 3 out of 3. 49 out of 54 passes in the game, 69 touches, and funnily enough, 7 out of 9 ground duels won. Again, an all-round performance, from Phil Foden. And for me, that was one of the reasons. I know, I believe Crystal Palace to play against Arsenal. Who knows? Saka might have potentially trumped him, in this kind of game. But if I'm being totally honest with you, from everything I've seen, from this weekend in the Premier League, yeah, it had to be Phil Foden, man. There was not a performance in the terms of under 23 players that I saw that was even remotely close to it. If I'm being that honest with you, there were a few players who played well. Dominic Szoboszlai, he played pretty decent in that game, but he never really took the control the way that Phil Foden did. Obviously, we saw Enzo Fernandez. He missed a penalty. Moises Caicedo, we already know. With that performance, again, sorry, Chelsea fans, but yeah, in a general sense, for me, Phil Foden, he was the best player across the Premier League, under 23 player, sorry, across the Premier League. And to be honest, actually, I'll be real, he was one of the top 2-3. I mean, they didn't really look all round in terms of the older players, but he definitely had to be in that top 3 in terms of performances, this weekend. And he's becoming more of a mature player, becoming more of that senior figure anyway, that it's even funny that I'm including him in these kind of lists because he's been around for so long. He's been brilliant, since he kind of started to, get his way into that Manchester City team or in and around that Manchester City team. So I think, with De Bruyne being injured, he should, hopefully for his sake, should have a good season where he's able to kind of take the mantle. And maybe they can, sound so weird, and I don't think they would do this unless De Bruyne asked to leave, but I don't want to use the words phase him out because I do think that that's a bit disingenuous to one of the best midfielders of all time in the Premier League in Kevin De Bruyne. But it will probably be a good thing in terms of just for him and also for Pep Guardiola because they lost Gundogan. I don't know the situation obviously with Bernardo Silva as well. Will he stay? Will he go? If he stays, then at least then they can keep these kind of players in and around because these guys are so important to what Manchester City are what they're trying to do. But yeah, he's my Premier League under 23 baller of the week. Let's head over to, we'll save that one. Let's head over to Germany. Let's head over to Germany. And again, we're looking at another player. We all know who he is, Alphonso Davies, the Canadian international captain, I think, yeah, of the Canadian national team. Again, excellent player, excellent fullback. I'm pretty sure most teams in Europe, if not all the top teams, would love to have a player. I know I would love to have him, as a fullback. Always have, wanted Liverpool to sign him, and I'm sure Real Madrid, the PSGs, and all these other kind of teams, I'm pretty sure they're all kind of looking at him and wondering if there's a deal that could potentially be struck, in the future. But ultimately, Bayern Munich are the team to have him. I know he's had his injury issues over the last, like, what I say, like 18 months, so to speak, and been in and out of the team and stuff like that. But in regards to his performance, at the weekend, really, really, really good performance. If I get up this for you guys, we'll take a look. Sorry, I didn't do this for Phil Foden. My apologies. I'll probably put that up at the end. But yeah, you guys can obviously see the screen now. Boom, boom, boom. As I mentioned, fantastic performance. Listen, it was really, really good down that left-hand flank as well. It's so weird with his positioning as well, because obviously the way that Bayern obviously play in terms of with their back line, it's a bit like Liverpool, if I'm being totally honest with you. The difference that you've got is you can probably afford to do that when you've got Davis on one side, who is quicker than anybody else out there, to be honest. We saw the run against Salah when Bayern Munich played Liverpool in the pre-season. We saw that pace. We saw what his pace is all about. And that was just then. I've seen him up against Mbappe. Now, I've seen Mbappe burn him at times, more due to skill and quick thinking. But then I've seen him catch up with Mbappe. Do you get what I'm trying to say? I don't know who's quicker, him or Coleman, but imagine as a fullback, Jesus Christ, imagine as a fullback, you having to come up against something like that. That scary hours, scary. Like if they're both on some level of form, like you'd have to be Manchester City. And Manchester City, I'm pretty sure they played Carl Walker back there. I think in the games that they played in last season's Champions League. That's probably one of only a few players who can match these guys in terms of pace. Do you get what I'm trying to say? I don't know any other right backs out there. Maybe like a Wan-Bissaka. He's really, really rapid as well. Can't think Hakimi as well, maybe. Don't really know. I can't really think, off the top of my head. But look, ultimately, there's not that many in terms of players who can keep up with Coleman and the Davis on that side. If they're both running at you and you've got a 2v1 situation, which is already peak for you if you're in that kind of situation. But if you are, yeah, just bring one of them down if you possibly can. See if you could just get the foul, because that's going to be, the best way through. They played, obviously, Werder Bremen. They won 4-0. Harry Kane got himself his first goal for the club. And Davis obviously assisted 2 goals in that game. Obviously, Sane scored 2 goals. And Matisse Tel, who is a fantastic player as well, by the way. Really, really do like him. A good striker. I think maybe obviously Harry Kane's there now, so it might be a bit difficult for him, but ultimately you never know in terms of injuries and just rotation if he can obviously get into the squad. But as I mentioned before, this is all about Davis, and as you can see here, man of the match, to be honest with you, best player on the park. Really did link up really, really well, with Coleman on that side, and yeah, was just a threat. And as I mentioned before, with his kind of positioning, in the team and stuff like that, it is weird because, like I mentioned, it is on that left-hand side, but then it's like he does play, that further upfield kind of thing. And it's almost like he can occupy. Obviously, in the future, it might be a problem if once his pace goes, is he intelligent enough to be able to just kind of, work his way? But we've seen with Carl Walker. I mean, ultimately, Carl Walker's a good defender, by the way, one of the best, actually, right backs ever in the Premier League. But in terms of Carl Walker, still got that pace. Over the age of 30, 32, whatever he is, I think he's like 33 or 34, and he's still blistering pace. So if Davies can keep himself in good nick, he'll be fine, to be honest, in the future, until such time, that goes kind of thing. But you can see him obviously here down that left-hand flank, obviously in the game, played 90 minutes, got himself 2 assists, 7 recoveries in the game, 2 out of 3 aerial duels won, 60 out of 67 passes made, barely, only misplaced 7 passes out of the 67 that he made. Amazing. 97 touches in the game and 5 out of 9 successful dribbles. So yeah, like I mentioned, man, an all-round game from Davis. Yeah, I really do like the defender, and let's see what happens. I believe Real Madrid potentially are looking at him for next summer. They're looking at everybody, to be honest with you. So don't be surprised there. But yeah, fantastic player. If we head on over to now, this one might get Liverpool fans, backs up, and that is Kefren Turam. Kefren Turam, the man that I don't know what's going on with him. I know a lot. Big up Ends man as well. I know this is one of his favorite players in terms of players he would love Liverpool obviously to sign. They could play DM, could play central midfield as well. Really, really good performance on the weekend. Really, really good performance, if I'm being totally honest with you. Seemed to be everywhere on that pitch, dominated the midfield as well with his performances. Was able to link up play really well, both in with the defense and with the attack. If we take a quick look at his performance in the game against Lorient, I mean, they only drew 1-1, but his performance really was, something to behold, if I'm being totally honest with you. As I mentioned before, able to dominate, that midfield against Lorient. Bit unfortunate that they weren't really able to get the victory kind of thing, but ultimately doesn't really matter. It's his performance that I'm more concerned with, or more interested in, to be honest. But you can see here, obviously playing in that kind of left central midfield position. Is that the position if Liverpool were to sign him? Is that the position that we kind of see him in? We already know of Liverpool's problems in terms of in the midfield area. Yeah, is that something we might potentially see? I do advise you guys to go and see this game. I know it was only 1-1, but his performance in the game, it really made me sit there and think, okay, all right. And that's what I wanted to see. Do you know what I mean? I didn't want to bloody see him in the under 21. I don't care about the under 21 competition. I want to see these guys back to their competitive football, for their senior teams. I want to see what these guys are like, and especially him as well, because of all the transfer rumors and stuff. It wasn't just Liverpool, Newcastle, PSG as well, looking at him. So the fact that he's been able to start the season, really, really well, is a testament, to him. And if we just take this off and get up his heat map for the game, as I mentioned before, literally everywhere, further up that field. I know we've got a Curtis Jones or McAllister, Szoboszlai, and these kind of players who kind of play in that position. But again, is there someone else that we could potentially add to the Arsenal, in terms of the bench? I know obviously Liverpool have already signed Endo, but again, these are the little things. These are the little things. I think that ship may have potentially sailed, but you never really know. And obviously in the game, like I said, really dominant performance, kept the ball well, retained possession well, was an option for his teammates. 3 out of 4 tackles, 2 out of 4 successful dribbles, got himself 2 out of 3 shots on target, 3 recoveries, 61 out of 66 passes, only misplaced 5 passes in the whole 90 minutes, 89 touches, and he won half of his ground duels, in which he made 14 of those. So 50% rate in terms of that. But, really for me, it was an all-round performance, from Kefren Turam. Now we will head on over to Italy. Now this one, I could have picked other players, but this one I felt was appropriate, if I'm being totally honest with you, and that is Michael Kayode. Now, the reason why I picked Kayode was because he actually made his debut for Fiorentina versus Genoa, where I think they ran out 4-1 winners in that game. Played at right back. Fantastic performance, from him in his debut game as well. A lot had obviously been spoken about him in the youth teams and stuff like that. So people had already been talking about him and stuff, and sooner or later he will be making that kind of step up, to senior men's football and stuff like that. But playing in that game, against Genoa, he was just fantastic down that right hand side. Like honestly, if we take a look at the game in itself, get this up for you guys. There we go. So yeah, if we get that up for you guys, obviously you guys can see. Look, I mean, he wasn't even named man of the match for the game, but I just felt like his performance, in that game was really, really good. Down that side, all up and down, the right hand side, defensively astute as well, able to get those tackles in, but he was able to bomb forward, and his dribbling ability was really, really good. Something I didn't really know too much about, prior to this. Only then looking at the scout reports and stuff like that. That's when I started to realize, oh, he's actually a fairly decent a fairly decent player, and he's got quite a lot of attributes. Strong runner. He's got a brilliant work rate. He can get up and down the field as well. So really, really good performance from him against Genoa. And obviously, as I mentioned, they ran out 4-1 winners. If you take a look at his stats for the game, see here, he played 82 minutes. He got 4 out of 4 successful dribbles. 5 clearances, 4 out of 5 aerial duels won, 5 out of 6 ground duels won, 48 out of 57 passes completed. Really, really good. Again, this is his debut, by the way. 88 touches and 9 recoveries. They ran out 4-1 winners. He was an absolute demon, down that right-hand side. And I think, in the future, what we're hopefully for his sake anyway, I think he'll be able to worm his way, into that Fiorentina team, in the future kind of thing. And I mean, look, he's an Italian under-19 international as well. Maybe he might be trying to push, for that start in the senior team in the future. We know Italy are kind of, I feel, going in a, would I say, different kind of way in terms of the players that they're potentially trying to push through. So, it's going to be interesting to see. And obviously, you guys can see here, like I mentioned before, defensively astute, but still able to get himself forward and further up the field, which is what I really, really liked from him. So good performance all round. Again, he's definitely a player to watch. He might even feature in my player watchers. Make sure you guys obviously heading on over to those, taking a look on my Instagram and TikTok pages for those as well. Got quite a few good ones this week. So yeah, check them out. He's probably going to appear very, very soon on my ones, because yeah, I think he's definitely a player. Another player that I've noted down every single week when I do these top 5 ballers, there always seems to be one player that I'm like, let me just write this guy's name down, real quick, because good performance or whatever in that game week. And definitely I would like to see more of that and see, really how they fare, if I'm being totally honest with you. Now, obviously, last but not least, as I mentioned before in the first week, I don't want to keep putting up the same players. So obviously we're just starting the series and stuff like that. And obviously throughout the season, we'll be showcasing quite a lot of talent, hopefully anyway, if there's going to be under 23 ballers out there. So we should be showcasing quite a lot of talent. But I had to put this guy in, like I generally did. I'll be super honest with you, for the second week running, and that is Jude Bellingham, yeah, I don't know, man. 2 games, 3 goals. I don't know. Honestly, I really, really don't know. This guy got himself 2 goals in the game. Yeah, he's starting the season, like a house on fire. If we look at the game anyway, against Almira, where they won 3-1. I think he even came out after the game and he was talking about, the comeback ability from Real Madrid, in terms of the never say, it's kind of like the never say die attitude. But he said, and this is something I think we all know and we all kind of see, especially obviously mostly in the Champions League, Real Madrid do not panic. That's one thing. I think, Almira, they went ahead, in the 3rd minute, and then, Real Madrid ended up scoring 3 goals. Bellingham got himself 2 goals in the game, and then Vinicius. I mean, the team is just too unfair anyway, if I'm being 100% honest with you. I mean, first of all, look at the midfield. You've got, and by the way, Camavinga didn't even start this game, which is crazy. Modric not even start this game. That's so crazy. Modric didn't start. Camavinga didn't start. It's calm. Don't worry about that, man. Don't watch that. Man, I got Cruz. I got Tchouameni. I got Valverde. I got Bellingham. Anyway, it doesn't even matter. Do you get what I'm trying to say? Obviously, Garcia playing at left back, where Camavinga's obviously appeared a few times last season. But yeah, their team is just mad. Their team is genuinely just mad. Like, it's just dumb. And the fact that, Bellingham is kind of spearheading that at this early part of the season, they need a talisman anyway. Let's be real. I mean, I know they've got, obviously, Vinicius is kind of that. Obviously, now that Benzema is gone. But in that midfield area, it's so vitally important that they do kind of have someone within that midfield who can just kind of, really help to dominate in the midfield area. And the way that Bellingham was getting himself forward, helping out with the attack, helping out in defense. And as I mentioned before, one of the things that he mentioned after the game is they're just so calm. Like, they go 1-0 down and it's like, yeah, don't watch that, man. Whether they come back or not, obviously, is then dependent on, themselves really and truly. It's whether they've got enough in their own arsenal, to be able to get themselves back. But ultimately, it's just a level of calmness, and you only get that, I feel anyway, with it's like you only get that with top teams. You only get that with top teams, and that's a mark of a top team anyway. I've seen it with Manchester City before. Obviously, Real Madrid, we've seen it countless of times, in the Champions League. I used to see it with Manchester United. I used to see it with Chelsea as well. Certain teams, like when they go 1-0 down, you're not even stressed about it. Like, I mean, I don't care. Do you know what I mean? I hope they lose. But in terms of the fans of those teams, I don't ever sense a level of unrest, if I'm being honest with you. I don't sense the crowd getting onto them. I don't even, when you look at the players' faces and stuff like that, they just look like, it's almost like they didn't even concede. It's almost like the game is still 0-0 and they're just continuing, however, whatever they were doing, they're just going to continue that because they know within their own abilities that, they're going to be able to come back in the game, or they should be coming back, in this kind of game. And, as I mentioned before with Bellingham's performance, that was kind of one of the things that he highlighted. And, it's quite interesting for him to hear him say that, to be honest with you. As I mentioned here, look, see him absolutely everywhere. Further forward, obviously, mostly playing in that kind of number 10-ish kind of role. But again, being able to still help out, in the midfield area. And then obviously, played 81 minutes, 2 goals, got himself an assist, 41 out of 44 passes in the game, only misplaced 3. Crazy. 4 out of 5 shots on target, 3 passes into the final third, 59 touches, and 3 out of 5 successful dribbles. Like I mentioned, man, a really, really good performance from him. I don't want to include him next week, so I beg someone else, one of the other guys. Like, if I see Bellingham score a hat trick next week, then it will be a hat trick of, you know what I mean? Like, there's only so much I can do, man. But I will try to hopefully try and weed out someone else, in there, kind of thing, so that we can take a look at someone else, because I don't want to waste Bellingham's 3 lives, in the first 3 games of the season, and then he absolutely drops stinkers, for the rest of the season. That's going to be pretty unfair, for him. But look, ultimately, that's my top 5, for the week. So obviously we started off with Phil Foden in the Premier League. Very, very good performance up against Newcastle, helping them to victory. Then we've got Alphonso Davies, obviously helping Bayern Munich to a 4-0 victory against Werder Bremen. And then obviously we head on over to France, where Kefren Turam helped Nice to a 1-1 draw against Lorient. Still a dominant performance from him, even though they did not get the victory, but he did everything in his power to, help that and facilitate that. And then obviously we've got debutant Michael Coyote, the Italian youth international, playing against Genoa, helping them to a 4-1 victory. Very, very good performance from him at the weekend. Please make sure you guys watch out for him, this season for Fiorentina. And then obviously we've got Jude bloody Bellingham, who's always going to be a problem, clearly, in these player watches. So I don't even need to tell you guys to watch out for this guy, because we already know, what he's all about. Bearing in mind, the reason why I even put him in there is you need to add context. This guy's playing for Real Madrid. He ain't playing for Dortmund. He ain't playing for Birmingham City. He ain't playing for one of these clubs who are fighting to challenge for top 4 or something. Nah, this is a guy who's playing for the biggest club in the entire world, Real Madrid. And he's out here just making it look like it's he's the Ronaldo in terms of the effect that he's having so far on the team. So long may it continue for him, man. Long may it continue for him. Helps England out too. Having such a superstar over there who's actually performing, not just kind of just there for the sake of being there. So yeah, man, it's going to be interesting to see, who we will add for next week. But guys, that is this week's top 5 under 23 ballers. Make sure you guys are obviously smashing that like button. Make sure you share. Make sure you subscribe to the damn channel. And as I always like to say, have a good week, man. Have a good week. And if there's any other players or any other players in certain leagues, certain teams you guys want me to, take a look at, please just drop me a DM. Let me know who you guys are obviously thinking about. I'm G. We are done for this week, and we are out.